Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to St. Stephen's lunchtime performance series. Normally I'd say welcome to the concert or to the music, but of course today, as a benchmark for what is a return to normal, we have the annual poetry recital by Auriol Britton, which defines the St. Stephen's concert calendar, always round about the beginning of September. We have this great series. We've had such great poets. We've heard about them and had their poetry recited in the past. And this time it's Robbie Burns. Auriol will say much more about that. Next week we have Michael Loder and friends. He, apart from being a wonderful storyteller and a clown and entertainer, he's also a good trumpet player. He might be playing flugel on this occasion. And then the other concerts are on this flyer. Next week also, the cafe arrangement will change. It will no longer be the secret cafe, but we, as a concert organisers, will be laying on coffee, biscuits, possibly sandwiches. We'll have to organise it between now and then. Alicia needs to take a break until she reviews how she wants to go forward on the Monday. But there'll be a full cafe service for the rest of the week. So that just affects Mondays. From now on, we want to pay the performers. So I hope that you reflect this in your generosity. The artists have had a very hard time during the pandemic. So I'm committed to paying a minimum fee to those artists who request it. Thank you for that. Now, I won't be introducing Robbie Burns, but I will introduce Auriol. Auriol has been a really important part of this programme, at least since I've been running it for the last 10 to 11 years. Auriol is known to most of you as a reciter of poetry, but Auriol her first skill is singing. She's a trained singer and has had a regular gig in the London Underground, well, all kinds of gigs at the London Underground, where she travels by train. And I've even bumped into her once or twice in Weston-super-Mare, so you might see Auriol out and about. Member of a choir, a keen Christian, a supporter of Christian aid, an indefatigable and professional, wonderful performer. So let's give a very warm welcome to our guest today, Auriol Britton.
Hello everybody, thank you for coming. Robert Burns, Rabbi, was born on the 25th of January 1759 at Alloway, 3 kilometres south of Ayr. The eldest of 7 children, his father William was a self-educated tenant farmer from Dunnottar in the Mearns, and his mother, Agnes Brune, was the daughter of a Kirk Oswald tenant farmer. Robert Burns was born in a house built by his father, now open to the public. The whole site includes Burns Cottage, the Burns Museum, the Poet's Way, Brigadoon, and the Burns Monument. Robbie lived at the cottage until 1766 at Easter, aged 7, when his father sold the property and took over the tenancy of a 70-acre farm at Mount Oliphant, south of Alloway. Here, Burns grew up in poverty and hardship, and the severe manual labour of the farm left its traces in the form of a premature stoop and a weakened constitution. Burns had little regular schooling. His father taught him reading, writing, arithmetic, geography and history. His father wrote a manual of Christian education for his 7 children. From 1765 to 68, John Murdoch, founder of an adventure school, taught Robert and his brother Gilbert French, Latin, and maths. In 1772, he studied for a while at Dalrymple Parish School, but later came home to do the harvest. In 1773, he studied for a further 3 weeks with Murdoch, but by the age of 15, Burns was the principal labourer at Mount Oliphant. During the harvest of 1774, Burns was assisted by Nellie Kilpatrick, who inspired his first attempts at poetry, "Oh, once I loved a bonny lass." In 1775, he was sent to complete his education with a tutor at Kirk Oswald, where he met Peggy Thompson, to whom he composed 2 songs, "Now West Lynne Winds" and "I Dreamed I Lay." In 1777, they moved to a 130-acre farm at Lochley, near Tarbolton. These, and many of the places I'm going to mention in today's performance, are in what is now the beautiful county of Dumfries and Galloway. And please also be warned, there is my attempts at Scottish dialect coming up. They settled and became integrated into the community. To his father's disappointment, Robert joined a country dancing school in 1779, and with his brother Gilbert formed the Tarbolton Bachelors' Club. I shouldn't think he was in that for long. His earliest letters date from this time, when he was making romantic overtures to Alison Begbie. 4 songs and a proposal of marriage later, and he was still rejected. Robert was initiated into the Masonic Lodge St. David, Tarbolton, on the 4th of July, 1781, aged 22. In December that year, he moved to Irvine to become a flax dresser, but at New Year, the flax shop burned down. He came home to Lochley Farm, and he became friends with Richard Brown, who encouraged him to become a poet. He began a commonplace book in 1783. His father, meanwhile, was fighting a legal battle over rent arrears at the farm. He lost in the sheriff court, and although he eventually won in the Court of Session, he died 2 weeks later. He won in January 1784, 1784, but he died 2 weeks later. It was seeing his father thus beaten down that really encouraged Burns to become a rebel against political and religious forms of authority which perpetuate inhumanity. Robert and Gilbert embarked on an ineffectual struggle to keep on the farm. They moved to another farm at Mosgiel near Morchlin in March that year, and would have an uphill struggle to maintain it for 4 years. Whilst there, he got to know a group of girls known collectively as the Belles of Morchlin, one of whom was Jean Armour. Burns's first child, Elizabeth, was born to her mother's servant, Elizabeth Peyton, in 1785. Meanwhile, Robert was embarking on a relationship with Jean Armour, who became pregnant with twins out of wedlock in March 1786. He signed a paper attesting his marriage to Jean, but her father tore it up, and to avoid disgrace, sent her to live with an uncle in Paisley. To support his family financially, Burns accepted the offer of work in Jamaica. He was to become bookkeeper and assistant overseer of slaves. In 1786, the abolitionist movement was already broadly active, and 6 years later, Burns would go on to write The Slave's Lament, typifying his egalitarian views. In spring 1786, Robert fell in love with Mary Campbell, whom he had seen in church in Tarbolton. He dedicated the poems The Highland Lassie, O, Highland Mary and to Mary in heaven to her. The poem Will Ye Go to the Indies, My Mary, and Leave Old Scotia's Shore suggests that they were planning to elope together. It has been suggested that on the 14th of May 1786, they exchanged Bibles and plighted their troth over the waters of Phelan in a traditional form of marriage. Soon after, however, Mary left her work in Ayrshire and sailed home from Greenock to Campbelltown to her parents. Since Burns lacked the funds to pay for his passage to the West Indies, Gavin Hamilton suggested that he publish his poems by subscription. Gavin Hamilton was a local man who Robert championed when he got into trouble with the Session Kirk, a church court, for Sabbath breaking. On the 3rd of April 1786, Burns sent the proposals for publishing his work to John Wilson, a printer in Kilmarnock. On the 25th of June, to obtain a certificate that he was a free man, Burns agreed to stand for rebuke in the Morklin Kirk for 3 Sundays. On the 22nd of July, he transferred his share of Mossgiel Farm to his brother Gilbert. He was wandering from friend's house to another, while Jean's father wanted a big sum of money, otherwise he would be thrown in jail, he felt. On the 31st of July, Wilson published Poems Chiefly in the Scots Dialect, known as the Kilmarnock volume. It sold for 3 shillings and contained some of his best writing, including The Twa Dogs and To a Mountain Daisy. It was an instant success. In the preface, Robert wrote about his lack of resources and education. On the 3rd of September, Jean gave birth to twins. On the 4th, Thomas Blackwood wrote expressing admiration for the Kilmarnock volume and proposing a second edition. Robert had already said goodbye to his friends, his luggage was on the way to Greenock, and he believed that he had written his last poem in Scotland when he heard the news. Again, he postponed emigration. On the 20th to the 21st of October 1786, Mary Campbell died of typhus, which she caught from her brother. She is buried at Greenock. On the 17th of November, Burns went to Edinburgh. And on the 14th of December, William Creech issued subscription bills for the first Edinburgh edition of Poems Chiefly in the Scots Dialect. It was published on the 17th of April, 1787. Within a week, Burns had sold his copyright to Creech for 100 guineas. Creech commissioned Alexander Naismith to paint an oval bust-length portrait of Burns, which is engraved to provide a frontispiece for the book. It is now in the Scottish National Portrait Gallery and has influenced subsequent representations of the poet. In Edinburgh, Burns was received as an equal by the city's men of letters. He was a guest at aristocratic gatherings where he bore himself with unaffected dignity. He made a great impression on the young Walter Scott. The new enlarged edition of the Poems Chiefly in the Scots Dialect brought Burns £400, but one critic says that it contains little of significance was added to the Kilmarnock volume. His stay in Edinburgh resulted in lifelong friendships, including with Lord Glencairn and Frances Anna Dunlop, his occasional sponsor, with whom he corresponded until a rift developed between them. He had a relationship with the separated Agnes Nancy Maclehose. They engaged in a passionate correspondence with pseudonyms. When it became clear that Agnes would not be seduced into a physical relationship, Robert moved on to her maidservant, Jenny Clow, who bore him a son, Robert Burns Clow, in 1788. He had another affair with a servant girl, Margaret May Cameron. Whilst in Edinburgh in spring 1787, he met James Johnson, a struggling music engraver and seller who had a love of old Scots songs and a determination to preserve them. Robert shared this passion. He became an enthusiastic contributor to a collection of books called The Scots Musical Museum. The first volume was published in 1787 and contained 3 poems by Raby. He contributed 40 songs to the second volume and ended up responsible for over 200 of the some 600 songs, and he also made an editorial contribution. The last volume was published in 1803. He returned to Dumfries and Galloway in 1788, and he resumed his relationship with Jean Armour. They married. She bore him 9 children overall, of whom 3 survived infancy. Jean Armour would go on to live until 1834. It seems understandable that Jean is often described as looking miserable in the paintings of herself, but she appears to have had a hard time of it, and a statue erected in Dumfries in her honour is a fitting tribute. Robert took out a lease on Ellisland Farm, settling there in June 1788. He trained to become a gauger or exciseman and began his job in customs and excise in 1789. This was in case farming should prove to be unprofitable. In November 1790, Burns wrote his masterpiece, the narrative poem Tam O'Shanter, in a single day on the banks of the River Nith. In 1791, he gave up the farm. Ellisland still contains a unique collection of books, artifacts, and writings well preserved. Also that year, Burns' relationship with Agnes Nancy Maclehose ended with a final meeting in Edinburgh, and he gave her a fond kiss, which we will hear in a minute. In 1792, he became a member of the Royal Company of Archers. After giving up the farm, the family moved to Dumfries. Burns was requested to write lyrics for the Melodies of Scotland. He contributed over 100 songs. He made major contributions to George Thomson's A Select Collection of Original Scottish Airs for the Voice. And arguably, it is the songs, these musical volumes, which are his greatest claim to immortality and place him in the front rank of lyric poets. He put words to Scottish folk melodies and airs which he collected, sometimes adapting traditional words already in existence. He arranged the music. He put songs together from fragments. My Love is Like a Red, Red Rose and Auld Lang Syne are examples of these. In letters, he explained that he preferred simplicity, relating songs to the spoken word, which he felt should be sung in traditional ways. Violin and guitar of the period would sometimes be used. The songs were later often transcribed for piano or for classical performance, and I can tell you that in my community singing, Burns' songs have played a sort of small but core part of it, and I have actually recorded 2 of them. He did some books called The Merry Muses of Caledonia, a collection of, these were revisions of songs, and these were bawdy ballads popular in Scottish music halls. In Dumfries in 1795, Burns wrote the famous poem A Man's a Man for a' That, based on writings in The Writings of Man by Thomas Paine, a political theologian of the American Revolution. He sent this poem in 1795 anonymously to the Glasgow Courier. Burns had become a radical, and his political poems about democracy include Parcel of Rogues to the Nation, the previously mentioned Slaves' Lament, and The Rights of Women. Although his prospects were better than they had been, Burns had become soured, alienated from many of his friends. He was expressing sympathy with the American and French revolutions. He was an advocate for democratic reform, votes for all men, and he was associated with he favoured the Society of the Friends of the People, which advocated political reform. His views came to the attention of his employers, but he pleaded innocence. He would meet with like-minded people at the Globe Inn in Dumfries, and in March 1795 joined the Royal Dumfries Fusiliers, volunteers. Burns would take long journeys on horseback as an excise supervisor, but as his health began to give way, he would be prone to fits of despondency. James Curry, himself a temperance activist, asserted that Burns's tendency for intemperance had exacerbated a long-standing rheumatic heart condition. On the 21st of July 1796, Burns died in Dumfries, aged just 37. His funeral was on the 25th, the day that his son Maxwell was born. Of Scotland's population of 1.6 million people, 10,000 flocked to the area for his funeral. He was initially buried in the corner of St. Michael's churchyard. A slab of freestone was erected by Jean Armour as a simple memorial, but some felt this insulting to his memory, and in September 1817 he was interred at the Burns Mausoleum in the same cemetery. His wife was later laid to rest with him. The Burns house, where he lived and died, the Robert Burns Centre, the Mausoleum, which is a large white building, and a Robert Burns statue in the centre of a circular flower bed can all now be visited in Dumfries. He was made a free man of Dumfries, and he was made a free man of several other Scottish towns, including Sanquhar, Dumbarton, and Lochmaben. Widely regarded as Scotland's national poet or bard, he has been called the Bard of Ayrshire and the Ploughman poet, among other things. He is the best known of the poets who wrote in the Scots dialect and has had a tremendous impact on Scots literature. Not all critics, however, share the same universal admiration. Burns has been regarded as a drunkard and a philanthropist. It has been said that Robert the Bruce or William Wallace would have been better advertisements, if you like, for Scotland. However, worldwide he is still celebrated, and the celebration of his life became almost a national charismatic cult in the 19th and 20th centuries. He was a cultural icon, a pioneer of the Romantic movement, and he went on to become an inspiration for the founders of both liberalism and socialism. In 2009, he was voted the greatest Scot in a poll organised by Scots Whay. Auld Lang Syne is sung at New Year and at Hogmanay and at New Year around the world, and Scots Whay is an unofficial national anthem. Now, if I may move rapidly on, ladies and gentlemen, I have some 11 poems for you today. Although he sort of pushed away, he not shunned, but although he disregarded, as it were, the religious establishment, Burns could be a very profound man with a deep faith in God, and some of his prayers and graces survive to this day. You'll be familiar with the Selkirk grace, but I'm going to do for you now just a quick thing, which is grace before dinner and grace after dinner. O thou who kindly dost provide for every creature's want, we bless the God of nature wide for all thy goodness lent. And if it please thee, heavenly guide, may never worse be sent, but whether granted or denied, Lord, bless us with content. O thou in whom we live and move, who made the sea and shore, thy goodness constantly we prove, and grateful would adore. And if it please thee, power above, still grant us with such store the friend we trust, the fair we love, and we desire no more. Robert Burns mentioned the winter is his favourite season, something which at least he and I both share, even if he's a much better poet. And after a tract of misfortunes in his life, when his mind was at a melancholy cast, which he seemed to share with the season, he composed the following song: Winter, a Dirge. The wintry west extends its blast, and the wintry west extends his blast, and hail and rain does blaw, but the stormy north sends driving forth the blinding sleet and snore. Wild tumbling brown, the burn comes down, and roars from bank to brae, and bird and beast in covert rest, and pass the heartless day. The sweeping blast, the sky o'ercast, the heartless winter day let others fear, to me more dear than all the pride of May. The tempest's howl, it soothes my soul, my griefs it seems to join. The leafless trees my fancy please, their fate resembles mine. Thou power supreme, whose mighty scheme these woes of mine fulfill, here firm I rest, they must be best because they are thy will. Then all I want, O do thou grant this one request of mine, since to enjoy thou dost deny, assist me to resign. This is called The Ruined Farmer, and it is probably inspired by the tragedy which overtook his father in the early part of 1784. The sun he is sunk in the west, all creatures retired to rest, while here I sit all sore beset with sorrow, grief, and woe. Oh, fickle fortune, oh. The prosperous man is asleep, nor hears how the whirlwinds sweep. But misery and I must watch the surly tempests blow. Oh, fickle fortune, oh. There lies the dear partner of my breast, her cares for a moment at rest. Shall I see thee, my youthful pride, thus brought so very low? Oh, fickle fortune, oh. There lie my sweet babes in her arms, no anxious fears their little hearts alarms, but for their sake my soul does ache with many a bitter throe. Oh, fickle fortune, oh. I once was by fortune caressed, I once could relieve the distress. Now life's poor support hardly earned, my fate will scarce bestow. Oh, fickle fortune, oh. No comfort I have, how welcome to me were the grave. But then my wife and children dear, oh, whither would they go? Oh, fickle fortune, oh. Oh, whither shall I turn? All friendless, forsaken, forlorn. For in this world rest or peace I never more shall know. Oh, fickle fortune, oh. This next poem was inspired by the overturning of a mouse's nest with the plough in November 1785. I give you To a Mouse. We sleekit current timorous beastie, oh what a panic's in thy breastie. Thou needna start awa sae hasty wi' bickering brattle. I would be laith to rin and chase thee wi' murdering pattle. I'm truly sorry that man's dominion has broken nature's social union and justifies that ill opinion which makes thee startle at me, thy poor earth-born companion and fellow mortal. I doot na whiles, but thou maun thieve. What then, poor beastie? Thou maun live. A dakin icka in a thrave's a small request. I'll get a blessing with the lave and never miss it. Thy wee bit hussy, too, in ruin. Is silly was the winds a strewin, and nae thing for to big a new in a foggage green. And bleak December's winds ensuing, baith snell and keen. Thou saw the fields laid bare and waste, and weary winter coming fast, and cosy here thou thought beneath the blast thou thought to dwell, till crash! The cruel coulter passed out through thy cell. That wee bit heap o' leaves and stibble has cost thee mony a weary nibble. Now that thou's turned out for all thy trouble, but house or hold to thole the winter's sleety dribble o' cranry cold. But Moosie, thou art no thy lane, improving foresight may be vain. The best laid schemes o' mice and men gang after glee, and lay us naught but grief and pain for promised joy. Still thou art blessed compared wi' me. The present only toucheth thee. But och, I backward cast my eon prospects drear, and forward, though I canna see, I guess and hear. Just to give you an idea of what that was about, a dakin icke in a thrave is an odd ear of wheat among 24 sheaves. Know thy lane means on thine own, and gang after glee is go off and awry. Foggage green, which he was talking about building a nest out of, is I've turned over the page. It's like old straw and stuff like that. The closing stanza of this next poem is said to have been composed ex-tempore during a dinner at the home of John Morrison, a Mauchline cabinet maker. It was sent to the Caledonian Mercury and was the first of Burns's poem to be published in any periodical. I give you, ladies and gentlemen, Address to a Haggis, and to give you a rough idea what this is about. These are the most challenging to understand. It gets much more straightforward after this. This is really a complete celebration of having a massive feast and being completely sated and rejoicing completely in the haggis. This is Address to a Haggis. Fair fair for your honest sonsy face, great chieftain of the puddin race. Aboon them all ye tak your place, pinch, tripe or therm. Weel are ye worthy of a grace, as lang's my arm. The groaning trencher there ye fill, your head is like a distant hill. Your pin would help to mend a mill in time of need, while through your paws the dews distill like amber bead. His knife see rustic labour dicht, and cut you up with ready slicht, trenching your gushing entrails bricht like ony ditch. And then, oh what a glorious sight, warm reeking rich. Then horn for horn they stretch and strive, deal tack the hindmost on they drive, till all their wheel-sailed swelled kites be liver bent like drums. The old guidman mayst like to rive, be thank it hums. Is there that are his French ragout, or olio that would stow a sou, or fricassee would mak her spew a perfect sconner, looks down with sneering scornful view and see a dinner. Poor devil, see him o'er his trash, as feckless as a withered rash, his spindle shank a guid whip lash, his neve a knit. Through bloody flood or field to dash, oh how unfit. But mark the rustic haggis fed, the trembling earth resounds his tread. Clap in his wily neve a blade, he'll make it whistle, and legs and arms and heads will sned like taps of thistle. Ye powers, wha mak mankind your care, and dish them out their bill of fare. Old Scotland wants nae skinking ware that jumps in luggies. But if ye wish grateful prayer, gie her a haggis. Skinking ware that jumps in luggies is watery stuff that splashes about in porringers. Warm reeking is steaming, and fair for your honest sonsy face. So sonsy is cheerful, and a boon is above. Okay. Robert Burns visited the field of Bannockburn near Stirling on the 26th of August, 1787. This unofficial national anthem, ladies and gentlemen, please do join in here or at home if you know the words. Scots wha hae wi' Wallace bled, Scots wha Bruce has aften led, welcome to your gory bed, or to victory. Now's the day and now's the hour, see the front of battle lower, see approach proud Edward's power, chains and slavery. What will be a traitor knave? What can fill a coward's grave? What say base as be a slave? Let him turn and flee. While for Scotland's king and law, freedom's sword will strongly draw, free man stand or free man fall, let him follow me. By oppression's woe and pains, by your sons in servile chains, we will drain our dearest veins, but they shall be free. Lay the proud usurpers low, tyrants fall in every foe, liberties in every blow, let us do or die. Wallace is Sir William Wallace, Robert the Bruce, King Robert I, 1306 to 28. Lower means approach menacingly, and Edward is King Edward of England, Edward II, 1307 to 27. And I will just tell you that the tune to that song, the tune, sort of march type thing, is is the basis for the fourth and final movement of arguably my favourite piece of classical music. Max Bruch's Scottish Fantasy, which he wrote before he'd even set foot in Scotland. He went to the library in Munich and did research because he was fascinated with Scotland. The Scottish Fantasy is based on Scottish folk melodies. It is an arrangement of traditional Scottish tunes for orchestra, harp, and solo violin. I strongly commend it to you, but the last movement is based on this song. And I think the third movement of all of it is the most beautiful, but it's all marvellous stuff. Now, nobody really does romance like Robert Burns, and this is his parting gift. We've got a couple of little romantic treasures now from him, and this is his parting gift to Nancy Mucklehose, A Fond Kiss. A fond kiss, and then we sever. A farewell, alas, forever. Deep in heart-wrung tears I'll pledge thee. Warring sight and groans I'll wage thee. Who shall say that fortune grieves him, while the star of hope she leaves him? Me, nae cheerful twinkle lights me, dark despair around benights me. I'll nae blame my partial fancy, nae thing could resist my Nancy. But to see her was to love her, love but her, and love forever. Had we never loved sae kindly, had we never loved sae blindly, never met or never parted, we had nae been broken-hearted. Fare thee weel, thou first and fairest, fare thee weel, thou best and dearest. Thine be ilka joy and treasure, peace, enjoyment, love and pleasure. A fond kiss, and then we sever. A farewell, alas, forever. Deep in heart-wrung tears I'll pledge thee. Warring sight and groans I'll wage thee. Oh, my love is like a red, red rose that's newly sprung in June. Oh, my love is like a melody that's sweetly played in tune. As fair art thou, my bonny lass, so deep in love am I. And I will love thee still, my lass, till all the seas gang dry. Till all the seas gang dry, my dear, and the rocks melt with the sun. And I will love thee still, my dear, while the sands of life shall run. And fare thee weel, my only love, and fare thee weel a while. And I will come again, my love, though 'twere 10,000 mile. This poem, the third from the end, is often sung at the opening of the Scottish Parliament. It's intense contempt for authority, wealth, status, privilege makes this a revolutionary poem of the highest order. If I could name you a top 10 of the greatest poems ever written in the whole world, this poem would have to be among them. And if you remember nothing else of today, please take with you "A man's a man, for all that." Is there for honest poverty that hangs his heed and all that? The coward slave we pass him by, we dare be poor for all that. For all that and all that, our toils obscure and all that. The rank is but the guinea's stamp, the man's the good for all that. Good for all that. What though an himly fair we dine, where huddin gree and a' that, gie fools their silks and knaves their wine, a man's a man for a' that. For a' that and a' that, their tinsel show and a' that, the honest man, though e'er sae poor, is king o' men for a' that. Ye see yon birkie called a lord, with struts and stairs and a' that. The hundreds worship at his word, he's but a coof for a' that. For a' that and a' that, his ribbon star and a' that. The man o' independent mind, he looks and laughs at a' that. A prince can mak a belted knight, a marquis duke and a' that, but an honest man's aboon his might. Good faith, he maunna for that. For a' that and a' that, their dignities and a' that, the pith of sense and pride are worth a higher rank than a' that. Then let us pray that come it may, as come it will for a' that sense and worth o'er all the earth shall bear the gree and a' that. For a' that and a' that, it's coming yet for a' that man to man the world o'er shall brothers be and a' that. So coming back to the last verse, and I think that sense and worth o'er all the earth has to be one of the most challenging lines to say. You need to kind of take the consonants off and just keep doing the vowels over and over again and then add the consonants back on. But bear the gree means have priority. Earlier in the poem, hodin grey, or hodin gree as contrasted with silk, is coarse woolen cloth. Berkey is a fellow and a coof is a fool. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming along here today. I think I've indulged some indulgence in being allowed to do this poetry recital. Thank you very much all for coming along today. We're going to close in a second with two final prayers from Robert Burns. These are going to be prayer in the prospect of death and stanzas composed on the same occasion. If anybody has any complaints about the poor attempt at Scots dialect, please, send them in. Thank you so much for being so generous at these poetry recitals in the past. It is really appreciated. Please do dig deep again today. I should tell you that I'm foregoing my massive, tiny fee so that we could afford to pay for the brilliant Rodri to film it so that hopefully it can be seen by a wider audience. That was much more important to me than the money. So I'm really grateful to Rodri for this because I wanted it to be available north of the border. So thank you so much for that. A couple of quick commercials as well. Singing brochures are available if you want to book a sing. And I've got my usual merchandise on offer at the back here. You can pay for that by card or cash, assuming the reader works. And that is ranging from £5 down to £1. That is CDs and cards and things. And also, just to bring to your attention, please pick up a green and gold business card for Poetry Gold. This is a lockdown enterprise which I invented. And for those of you who haven't encountered the sort of, rubbish that is Poetry Gold, Poetry Gold is a lovely thing. And it's a daily poetry text service. So every working day at about 7:45 in the morning, unless it's late, the recipients get a small poetic text, a 3-line poem sent direct to their messaging inbox. There's no fixed charge, but people pay whatever they can afford or whatever they think the service is worth. So please pick up one of the green and gold business cards for Poetry Gold and follow the instructions. If you text sample to the number on the card, you can have a free sample. So this is prayer on the prospect of death, followed by stanzas composed on the same occasion, usually assigned to 1784. This was probably composed in December 1781, at a time when Burns was, thought he was about to die 15 years before he did. So he thought he was about to bid an eternal adieu to all the pains and uneasiness and disquietude of this weary life. And thank goodness he didn't. O thou unknown almighty cause of all my hope and fear, in whose dread presence ere an hour perhaps I must appear. If I have wandered in those paths of life I ought to shun, as something loudly in my breast remonstrates I have done, thou know'st that thou hast formed me with passions wild and strong, and listening to their witching voice has often led me wrong. Where human weakness has come short, or frailty stepped aside, do thou all good, for such thou art, in shades of darkness hide. Wherewith intention I have erred, no other plea I have, but thou art good, and goodness still delighteth to forgive. Why am I loath to leave this earthly scene? Have I so found it full of pleasing charms? Some drops of joy with draughts of ill between, some gleams of sunshine mid renewing storms. Is it departing pangs my soul alarms, or death's unlovely, dreary, dark abode? For guilt, my terrors are in arms. I tremble to approach an angry God, and justly smart beneath his sin-avenging rod. Fain would I say, forgive my foul offence, fain promise nevermore to disobey, but should my author health again dispense, again I might desert fair virtue's way, again in folly's path might go astray, again exalt the brute and sink the man. Then how should I for heavenly mercy pray, who act so counter heavenly mercy's plan, who sin so oft have mourned, yet to temptation ran? O thou great governor of all below, if I may dare a lifted eye to thee, thy nod can make the tempest cease to blow, or still the tumult of the raging sea. With that controlling power assist even me, those headlong, furious passions to confine. For all unfit I feel my powers to be, to rule their torrent in the allowed line. Oh, aid me with thy help, omnipotence divine. It's been lovely to see you all here again this year. A great relief after last year. Thank you so much for coming, and goodbye. Thank you. And I should briefly say, by the way, next year, Elizabeth Barrett Browning. Elizabeth Barrett Browning next time.
Well, Auriol Britton, telling us of a Republican-minded poet, but tiara-clad Auriol. I wonder if that's some kind of comment. But interestingly, unlike William Blake, who was sceptical about Nobodaddy in the sky, had a critical, Robbie seems to still have a deference to the great gentry in the sky. But we have a taste of this tempestuous, emotional man, kind of a man of our times, a person of our times, who can really relate to this poet, through Auriol's great honouring. All that work he did into the history, and a pretty good accent, I thought. It reminded me of my time reading, studying A-level history, and the French Revolution was the dominant theme when I was doing that. And those kind of values as a young person that I took on, you really brought all that to life. So Auriol, thank you so much. And one line I will take away from me is the image of the ploughman ploughing the land, and then there's this broken mouse's nest. So man's dominion breaking nature's union. That's a great line, very much a line for our times as well. Auriol Britton, thank you.